Hey there, welcome to today's episode. It's going to be another live unedited session. Another noisy day again here in London. Apologies for any background noise, but we are taking a look at 16 pitches on the Ableton Move. If you need to turn 16 pitches on, if you're unfamiliar with this particular feature, this function, you do Shift and there's a little square icon here. Only works when you're using drum rack, so you load up a drum rack here. You'll notice you get your 16 pitches at the side when you've turned this on. For every sample that you select, you can then play that sample in 16 pitches. So I've got a kick drum, a snare drum. It's quite a powerful little tool, this. It will help to hopefully expand your expectations of what this device can do, because we know we've got 4 tracks. I've already shown you resampling in another video and how you can use resampling to free up tracks. And I think using 16 pitches is actually another way that I've only just really discovered that you can do this. So let's do a little demonstration because it's kind of more fun than just talking about things. Let's start with some drums. I used the capture button there to capture my little performance. Obviously had like 1 bar of drums in mind. That's captured pretty well. I'm not going to bother quantizing or anything. We'll just keep moving forward. I've got some other samples and I just populated these with a bunch of the Ableton built-in samples. Not my favorite, but it will hopefully be good enough for a demonstration. It's calculated our BPM at 91 BPM. We'll just stick with that. Got a little crash cymbal here. I might record that into the beginning. That is now loaded into the loop. One thing I might want to do though is expand on this a little bit. Let's just make it 2 bars so we can do Shift, and the step just before the end step here is double, so we can double our loop. Now got 2 bars. If we take a look over here, you can see it says 2 bars. We can jump between the bars using these arrow buttons. So this is bar 1. If I move to bar 2, all I want to do is take this crash cymbal off of that step, because I only want the crash cymbal at the beginning of the first bar. You can hear we've taken that out. Let's see what else is in here. Okay, got a couple of like percussive sounds that I've thrown in. I might use this shaker. I'm not going to use all of these samples. I just threw a few things in that I could use as a demonstration. I'm going to turn the fixed velocity off now, which is this little step here, so that I can put these shakers in with like a little bit of, yeah, kind of human variation. Now, my timing wasn't great there, but we can fix all of this by just doing some quantization. And I'm going to hit this pretty hard. We'll just quantize 100%. It's not going to matter. I'm going to apply a little groove afterwards, so we can use this little groove tool. And we'll apply some swing back into our drums because, of course, we just quantized everything. Now it's going to be a bit stiff. Let's do, I don't know, 95%. Yeah, sounds good enough. This shaker might be a little loud for my taste, so we can select the sample, and using the volume encoder, I can just bring that volume down a little bit. All very basic stuff. Now we get to the fun part where we can start playing around with 16 pitches and take a closer look at this. So it's a way of expanding upon the idea of 4 tracks, because currently we've built some drums, and you could kind of stop there and say, okay, well, my first track here, this orange track, is the drums, and then move on to another. But with 16 pitches, we've actually got a lot of options just inside of one drum rack. So if we take something else, I think there's a sample here somewhere. Yeah, this one. I'm going to put fixed velocity back on for a second. So this was in the Ableton library, and to me it sounds like a little flute, it sounds like a sample chop. The cool thing about that is we can now use our 16 pitches with this particular sample to play those sample chops. Unfortunately, I still need to use the hold button just to cancel all long samples playing for a second while we're demoing this. But that's what we can do, so we can do that. You'll notice that with the 16 pitches, it's monophonic. That's its kind of limitation, really. If you've got something that's melodic, and I think up here I put some, yeah, like a little individual instrument sound. You'll hear that it's monophonic, it's not overlapping, it's not layering those samples. That is a little limitation to this. But if you then make a copy of this one, so here, got two of exactly the same instrument, I could put in some notes here, whatever, and then I could create another layer of those, all still inside of the one track. So just, keep in mind that there are limitations, but there are always kind of workarounds. So you could double up on these to kind of build out more complex melodies that are overlapping, even put some chords in and things. The other thing that's interesting here is that I thought initially it's called 16 pitches, so that's what you get, and it is. We've got 16 pitches. What I didn't realize was that this is still connected to the octaves, so if you want to play around with octaves, you still can. And we can go all the way up. Just leave it there for now. You've got all of your octaves. You also have the in-key mode that works with this still whilst using the drum rack. We've got the 16 pitches. And if you're not familiar with in-key, it's kind of putting your Ableton Move into a mode where it plays keys and scales. So if we do shift and we press this little musical note, we get the menu for that. This is just a basic chromatic scale, so you're playing just like you would a typical keyboard. But if I change this to in-key, I am now playing C and then whatever scale we choose here. So we could choose just like a major or a minor. We can also change the key, of course, as well. So we want to be in E. I can do that. So we can still play in key, and we can also still use the octaves at exactly the same time. Get the idea. So suddenly I think this really opens up, because my initial thought was, yeah, we've got these 16 pitches, which is kind of fun, but actually it's really a lot more than that when you think you can move up and down the octaves, and you can also play in terms of a key and a scale. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go back to the top, because I'm going to just keep this in chromatic mode for now, something nice and basic. Just switch that mode back over. And then when we go back to our little thing that sounds like a sample chop, I think it sounds quite good there. We don't want to pitch it up and down too much for this particular sample, but we can try and work out a little melody, something that will go along with our drums. Maybe even just something as simple as that. Let's see if MIDI Capture got it for us. Again, having to use the hold button to just stop all the samples while we're doing the demo. So that's great. We can use the sample chops. It's kind of cool that it works in Monophonic for something that is like a sample chop, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're putting it into its own choke group without really needing to put it into a choke group. So it works quite well for things like this. And of course, you could have a bunch of different samples recorded in here. You could have some drum samples on, I don't know, say the bottom 4 pads. The next set could be something else, melodic, it could be a bass line, it could be something else. And you'd still have the top 8 pads to then record something in and do some sample chopping, which I've shown you in other videos, still whilst also then being able to play around with all the pitches. So the point I'm trying to get at, of course, is that although we are only using one track, we're starting to flesh out the idea for a beat of some kind. On this pad here, I've got this bass sample. It's not the nicest bass sample. Let's see if we can just tweak it a little bit. One thing I'll do is I'm going to do the shift button. We need to be on here. We need to come out of looping mode for a second. Let's do the shift button. And then I want to come to parameter banks. And I want to move over to filter and setup so that I can just filter this bass out a little bit. Yeah, going to leave it like that, just filtered out a little bit. Still a little bit kind of digital sounding for what I want, but I just wanted to use the Ableton plugins, or the Ableton sounds even. So we've now got that loaded. let's see if we can work out a basic bass line that will go with our loop. Something as simple as that. It's not the best, but it will do. Get the idea. Good enough for this particular episode. For me, I'd want to bring in my own samples, longer samples where you can play around with this. You get like a bit of a better feel. But it's good enough for the purposes of this. Let's just take a look at that sample. Just going to reduce the volume down of that. And then finally, let's take a look at these melodic samples. I'm going to do the same. Let's just move back. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I haven't got shift lock on. I want to just move back to this particular level and I want to apply an effect. So here I think I want to apply a little delay and I only want to apply it on a pad basis. So I'm going to swap this reverb out for a delay. So we're going to move up, find a delay, and let's do 8 dotted. That way, when we're using this first effect slot, we can just send this for an individual pad. So in this case here, we can hear that, but it's not on this one, you'll notice. Then I think overall, yeah, I think we'll leave it like that. We could apply another effect, but that applies to everything. So if we put some reverb on, we're going to be applying reverb to everything in here. So for now, I think that will do for this particular episode. Let's just have a little bit of delay. And again, let's just see if we can work out something very basic to put over the top. Keep in mind as well that what we could do is we could try and work out the key of that sample and then put it into in-key mode so we'd have more notes to play from. I'm not going to do it in this particular episode, but just be mindful again that we could switch and try and find the key in the scale for this little sample chop thing we've got here so that as you're noodling around, you won't be able to kind of, hit any bum notes. I'm going to just do it with chromatic because we're only using a couple of very simple notes here to layer something up. Just wanted to point that out. Like those two simple notes. Still think it's a little loud. And again, wish we didn't have to wait for the entire sample to finish there. We should have a stop all button. I'm just going to quickly copy and paste that over because we've still got a version of this instrument. Got this one here. but I want the delay. So rather than having to come in and dial a delay in, I'm just going to copy this one and move it over to here. And now we've got the same delay. Rather than having to, dial that in, you can just copy and paste over. And what I think I'll do is we'll come up the octaves a little bit this time and just try and put like a little bit of an extra melody in over the top. Maybe something like that. When you've got one loud note, that's what I'm kind of interested in changing here, is because we put those two notes in. That's fine, the kind of melody's right, but I wish there was a little bit of variation for that particular note. But we can see the note on the step sequencer, it's this one towards the end of the second bar. So I can just grab this one and then we can change the velocity of that particular note. Could bring that down a good chunk, might be too much. And we'll wait for the long sample to play. Please, Ableton, give us the kill button. That's really what we need. But you can see, hopefully, the purposes of this episode was to show you 16 pitches, the functions of that, and how you can expand on the idea of your 4 tracks, because we've made a beat, a sketch idea, okay? It's not great, but it's good enough. And we've got all of that happening inside of one particular track. I haven't used any of my 3 other tracks yet, which of course I could do. I could still take elements out of this and resample those down and save spaces. So if we've got something here, we've got these two. If you wanted to grab all of those, unfortunately I don't think there is any kind of solo button, but you can mute all the other pads around and you can hold your finger down like this on the pads, which is nice. So it's easy enough to mute a bunch of things you don't want. And you can see what we can do there. We are resampling down. Well, technically we could if we go into resample mode and we switch this to resampling. I could find a pad, so I don't know, one that I don't think we've used. I don't think we use one over here. Just going to let it play for slightly longer than what I wanted. And of course we can come back in and unmute all the pads that we're not using. But we now have that resampled. So if we wanted to free up another 2 slots, we can now mute these. And we can just make sure that at the beginning of our first bar, we're putting in this new step, which we've got selected here. And that has now been resampled down. We've freed up another 2 slots. It's just going to play out, unfortunately, because we don't have the stop all samples. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for this episode. I hope you found that useful. It's another way at looking at this device beyond the limitations of the 4 track, because really that's what you've got. You've got way more than 4 tracks when you think about it that way, using resampling and this really great 16 pitches option. Sure, it would be nice in the 16 pitches if there was a way to set that so you could overlap samples and play it. Unfortunately, I don't think there is. I think it is kind of limited to being monophonic, but hopefully I've showed you some workarounds for that as well. Anyway, I'm going to sign off. Take care. I'll see you guys in the next episode.